Hi everyone and welcome. Thanks for making the time today to join us on this presentation. I'm Nicky Buckley, from East Midlands HR. We work with small businesses across the East Midlands and also into London as well on practical HR, and this session is very much in that spirit. Here's how this session will go. In October 2026, so not far away, two separate legal duties change. We're going to take a look at one at a time, look at what each one means in practice, and then work through a 6-step checklist. Bit difficult to say, so you have a clear picture of where your business stands and what to prioritise before October. There'll be time for questions at the end, or you can feel free to give us a call, and we can answer as many questions as we can. Okay, here we go. So you might have already heard of the Worker Protection Act, which came into force in October 2024. That introduced a duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment at work. From October 2026, the Employment Rights Act 2025 introduces two distinct changes, and it's worth being clear on both before we get into the practical steps. The first is an upgrade to the existing duty. The standard rises from reasonable steps to all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment. That applies to everything that happens within your workforce, colleague to colleague, manager to employee, in the office, at work events, anywhere with a sufficient connection to employment. Second is a brand new separate duty, direct third-party liability. From October 2026, if a customer, client, contractor, or supplier harasses one of your employees and you can't show that you've taken all reasonable steps to prevent it, you are liable. And this applies across all 9 protected characteristics under the Equality Act, so not just sexual harassment. Race, disability, religion, age, all of it falls within scope when third parties are involved. We're going to look at each one separately because they have different implications for your business. So let's talk about the shift from reasonable steps to all reasonable steps first. Under the current standard, if an employee makes a tribunal claim for sexual harassment, as an employer, you need to be able to show that you took reasonable steps to prevent it from happening. This includes things like risk assessments, accessible reporting routes, and regular training. From October 2026, the bar raises even higher. A tribunal will ask whether there was anything further you could reasonably have done, and if the answer is yes, your defence will weaken considerably. So let's have a look at an example. So say you run a business with 20 staff, you have a harassment policy, you did a company-wide training session 18 months ago, and you have an HR email address people can report to. On the surface, it looks reasonable, but your risk assessment hasn't been updated since you took on 3 new client-facing roles. Your manager's completed the training, but there's not been any refresher, no record of it, no record of what was covered. And when you ask your staff how they'd report a concern, most of them mentioned going to their line manager rather than the HR inbox because nobody really knew the inbox existed. Under the current standard, you might just about have a defence. Under all reasonable steps, a tribunal would ask, why wasn't the risk assessment updated when the roles changed? Why hasn't training been refreshed? Why didn't staff know about the reporting route? If the answer to any of these is we just didn't get around to it, that's where you could be exposed to. So the EHRC can investigate employers directly without waiting for a tribunal claim. And if an employee brings a successful sexual harassment claim and a tribunal finds that the preventative duty hasn't been met, compensation can increase by up to 25%. For a small business, that uplift on an already uncapped award is a serious number. So the third party duty is a separate thing entirely, and it catches a lot of small business owners off guard when they understand the full scope of it. This isn't just about sexual harassment. A racist comment from a regular customer, a disableist remark from a contractor, age-related abuse from a client, all of it is now within scope. If your staff deal with people outside the business and you haven't taken all reasonable steps to prevent harassment from these interactions, you're liable. So a customer makes a sexual comment to your receptionist, your member of staff mentions it informally. You have no written process for logging or responding to third-party incidents. If that employee later brings a claim, a tribunal will look at what steps you had in place to prevent it. If the answer is none, then you've got a problem. Scenario 2, a contractor works across your site regularly. Over time, your employees start to dread dealing with him because of the comments he makes. Nobody formally reported it, partly because they weren't sure how to. The harassment was happening, no system to catch it early, and it escalated. Under new rules, that contractor's behaviour is your responsibility to manage and prevent. And lastly, a client emails your account manager with messages that are offensive and unwanted. That's still in the course of employment. You need a process for how your team flags it and how you respond as a business. None of these are unusual. The question is whether your business has the structure in place to deal with it. So it's worth pausing on enforcement before we get to the checklist, because this is the bit that surprises most small business owners. You don't need employment tribunal for the employment rights to come knocking. The Equality and Human Rights Commission can investigate employers on its own initiative. It can enter into binding agreements, require specific action, and in 2025 it did exactly that with Lidl, after a tribunal found that managers were unaware of anti-harassment policies and no risk assessments had been done. That's the kind of case the October 2026 changes are designed to prevent more of. If an employee does file a sexual harassment claim and a tribunal finds you fail the preventative duty, compensation can be increased by up to 25%. Harassment awards are uncapped. A 25% uplift on an uncapped award is quite a meaningful number for a small business. Both duties sit within the same enforcement framework. The checklists we're about to work through address both. Okay, so this is the main thing that you need to know. We're going to work through each step, and as we go, I want you to honestly assess which of these you could tick right now with evidence to back it up. Step 1 is the risk assessment, and it's the one most businesses haven't done yet. It needs to cover both duties: where could sexual harassment occur within your workforce, and where do your staff interact with third parties who could harass them. Without a documented risk assessment, you're starting from a weak position. If anything is ever challenged, it's the first thing an EHRC investigation will look for. Step 2 is your policy. If it hasn't been updated since before October 2024, it certainly doesn't cover third-party harassment explicitly, or all protected characteristics, or the upgraded standard. It needs to address both duties clearly, plain language that your staff can actually read and access. Step 3 is your reporting route. A lot of small businesses handle this informally, and that falls apart under an all reasonable steps standard. You need a documented process, a named second contact so staff aren't reliant on going to their manager, and clear reassurance about confidentiality. For third-party incidents especially, your staff need to know that they can flag a customer or client's behaviour and it'll be taken seriously. Step 4 is manager training. Your managers are the first line of response for both duties. They need to know how to receive a disclosure correctly, when to escalate, how to handle situations where the problem is a colleague or a client. If training happened once a few years ago and there's no record of it, that's a gap. Step 5 is staff training. Your employees need to know what harassment looks like across both duties, including comments passed off as jokes, that they're expected to report it, and what happens when they do. For customer-facing teams, this is especially important. A member of staff who thinks they just have to put up with a client's behaviour is in a vulnerable position, and so are you. Document who attended, when, and what was covered. Step 6 is ongoing monitoring. Someone needs to be accountable for reviewing the policy annually, checking whether the reporting route is being used, and keeping the risk assessment current as your team and your client base change. Harassment prevention isn't a one-off task, and tribunals will look for evidence your approach is live, not filed, and not forgotten. So October is closer than it feels, and these things take longer to work through than you'd expect once you factor in getting policies updated, training scheduled, and documentation sorted across both duties. We offer harassment prevention reviews specifically for small businesses. We work through all 6 steps with you: risk assessment, policy review, reporting routes, manager training, staff training, and a monitoring framework covering both the sexual harassment duty and the new third-party liability. At the end of it, you've documented evidence that you've taken all reasonable steps. If you'd like to book in a review or just have a conversation about where your business stands, you can do that via the QR code, or we can put a link into the comments. We also are going to be running some workshops, so you'll be able to come onto those. They are going to be a paid workshop, and we'll be getting those dates out shortly. So it's all about a specific scenario in your business, what either of those duties means for your industry, or just where do you start. Nothing is too basic and nothing is off time limits. I do hope this quick presentation has been of interest to you today. It's a really important topic and something that you can take action with, deal with, and get resolved, and make sure your business is protected quite quickly. As I said, we are running some workshops in the area, and we can do additional online training and support, whatever you need. Just give us a call and we can talk you through. Thank you very much.